Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different. Our source material. It's not your usual spreadsheet or, a dry central bank report. Nope. We're actually diving deep into a single really powerful piece of literature, W.N. Wierathunga's The Ballad of the Broken Bank. It's basically a mock heroic allegory about a national financial collapse. And our mission here is to unpack the incredibly potent imagery and the deeply cynical takes this poem offers on things like institutional failure, political corruption, and how accountability just vanishes. It's a really sharp critique written in verse, and it starts right away, doesn't mince words, painting this picture of the bank standing tall and grand like temples built on borrowed sand.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating here is the form itself. The mock heroic allegory takes this really tragic, complex thing, economic collapse, and frames it almost like a ridiculous epic. That tone lets it boil down these huge economic and political failures into these really sharp, memorable images. So we'll look at that structure, moving from that initial setup of instability through the collapse and into the, frankly, very cynical aftermath.
Okay, let's jump right into that first image then. Temples built on borrowed sand. Temples, you think permanence, trust, right? Stability. But borrowed sand, that just screams fragility from the get-go. What's the poem telling you right there about the system's health?
It's a direct hit on structural risk. The appearance, the grand temples, it's all facade. And borrowed sand, well, that points to leverage, maybe unsustainable debt, or state assets just pledged away without a plan. It tells you the whole setup is geared towards managing appearances in the short term. It's definitely not about long-term strength. The foundations themselves are shaky, which means any failure is going to be, well, catastrophic. And that weakness, it leads straight into the kind of political thinking that runs the whole show. The poem mentions selling off assets, sell a few or 3 or 4. But notice why they're selling. It's not to fix the instability. It's specifically to buy some virtue with the store.
So it's not about actually being solvent, it's about looking virtuous, political points. They're essentially cashing in long-term national assets to fix a short-term PR problem and dressing it up like they're being responsible.
Exactly. It's pure political optics, which brings us neatly to the next step the poem outlines. This idea of restructuring, but without any real deeper form.
Right, the source talks about wanting to tear the central temple down and raise a newer, shinier crown. Okay, so a big public show of doing something new. But like you said, if they haven't dealt with the borrowed sand underneath, what good is a shinier crown?
It just underscores that the leadership's entire focus is on image, not substance. Fixing the real problems, that's not the goal. Rebranding the failure, that's the priority. It's like spending a fortune on a new logo and PR campaign while your company's heading towards bankruptcy because of underlying debt.
But couldn't you argue that maybe some rebranding is needed? To, restore confidence. Economies do run on belief, partly. Maybe it buys time for real fixes.
That's a fair point in theory. But the way the poem presents it, it feels much more like deliberate misdirection. The focus on the shinier crown isn't just a temporary thing. It is the main event. They're pouring resources into this flashy exterior, basically hoping everyone will look up at the shiny new building and not notice the foundation crumbling beneath their feet. The poem suggests they know the sand is still borrowed. They're just counting on the distraction working long enough. So as the allegory unfolds, the focus shifts a bit. It zooms in on the immediate trigger for the monetary crisis, which is personified by the central authority figure. And the poem's depiction is just devastating. It calls this figure a babysitter who guards the gold and rocks the rupee when it's cold.
Oof, babysitter? That's instantly dismissive, isn't it? Patronizing. Tasked with something vital, yes, but portrayed as just soothing things, placating. Not wielding real independent authority. It points right at regulatory capture, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The authority isn't really in charge. They're subservient. Their job is to keep things calm, manage perceptions, not to provide the tough, independent oversight needed for stability. And the poem immediately shows the kind of, double dealing this requires. Their whole routine is contradictory. By day he counts the nation's loss. By night he shines the ruler's gloss.
So the babysitter's real job isn't balancing the books, it's polishing the ruler's image, covering up the debt, keeping the political machine humming, essentially using their position to enable denial, not to provide, the hard truths.
And it's this subservience, this captured role, that allows the next step. It's a slide into total monetary disaster. The leadership gets encouraged towards really reckless money printing. The poem describes it so vividly. They're told to print the sun, the moon, the stars with this crazy idea they can sell them cheap to men in cars.
Wow, printing the cosmos. That scale just captures the sheer insanity of it. Reckless money supply expansion, fueled by this delusion you can just conjure value from nothing and hand it out. It's a perfect metaphor for like hyperinflationary policy, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And this huge monetary expansion comes with a critical piece, a dangerous political assurance. The leadership tells everyone, "Fear not, my dear, inflation's ghost shall not appear."
Yeah.
This is just outright denial of basic economics. They're not just being careless, they are actively lying about what must happen because of their actions. And it raises that timeless question, doesn't it, for any system running on delusion. What happens when reality, which, always wins, finally crashes against the official story?
Yeah, the official story never holds up forever. And the poem suggests that even before that crash, national funds were being, well, siphoned off, not for the country's needs, but for international status, vanity projects. It mentions shipping savings off to Greece or sending dollars to the West to have our chairman called the best.
And that might be the sharpest critique of elite priorities in the whole piece. Depleting crucial national reserves, the very dollars that could buffer the economy in a downturn just for prestige. They want that pat on the head from global powers to be seen as the best, more than they want to secure the well-being of their own people. It's portrayed as pure ego driving the depletion of national wealth.
Which, of course, sets the stage perfectly for the collapse. Once the reserves are gone, the currency tanks. The consequences are depicted as swift, traumatic. The poem describes the banks breaking almost with, like, glee from the perpetrator's side. Then break the banks, oh, what delight. Let billions dance into the night.
That word delight is so chilling. It frames the collapse not as some unfortunate accident, but as the planned, maybe even eagerly awaited final act of a scheme. It's the moment the big wealth transfer happens. The insiders cash out spectacularly while everyone else's world falls apart.
So, what about accountability then? Because the poem is pretty clear. The banks break, but the system that enabled it all, that seems to stay intact. The master flees through foreign doors, it says, yet his friends still cheer from marble floors.
Exactly. It highlights this double failure. First, the economic collapse, then immediately the failure of justice. The main player gets away, often with the money, and meanwhile, the network back home. The collaborators, the beneficiaries, they're untouched, celebrating on their marble floors, facing zero consequences. The system enables the crime and then protects the criminals. And this total lack of accountability means there has to be an immediate cover-up, right? Which brings us to the aftermath.
Yeah.
The poem describes 2 kings arise with holy vows and hide the files behind their brows.
2 kings arise. Sounds like a new government, maybe a coalition, promising change with those holy vows. But their first move isn't justice. It's hiding evidence. Hide the files. That suggests it's bipartisan, or at least the successors are in on it, ensuring the proof disappears. It's continuity of corruption, not a break.
Precisely. Those holy vows of reform are just a smokescreen to obscure the truth. And this deception, it spreads everywhere. The poem really calls out the media's role in propping up the lie. The screens proclaim no loss, no theft. Though empty coffers are what's left, the anchors grin, the traitors lie.
That line is just brutal. It indicts everyone who's supposed to be a watchdog. The media is actively selling a fantasy. Even the financial experts, the traders, are lying about the real situation. It describes this systemic infection, doesn't it, where truth is sacrificed to maintain that fragile illusion of stability.
And the rot goes so deep it even infects the opposition. The poem points out the rebels feast with those they curse, their pockets full, the people worse.
Yeah.
So the very people who should be screaming for accountability and reform, they get bought off, pulled into the system of extraction, and the ordinary person, left worse off than before.
And the final nail in the coffin for accountability seems to be the courts, where justice is impossible because, as it says, the game is lost ere it began, no path for redress left.
Which brings us to a really critical point about knowledge itself in a system like this. The poem looks at the learned men of trade and thought, the experts, the academics, and it questions what good their knowledge is when the watchmen sleep, the thieves debate. If the experts understand exactly what went wrong, but the people in power just ignore them or silence them, what's the point of that expertise? It suggests this profound failure of influence, where careful warnings are just drowned out by political impunity.
The level of cynicism is almost overwhelming. It culminates in that moral inversion the poem identifies. Quote, "Who steals with style deserves the state."
That really is the core message the mock heroic form delivers so powerfully. It's saying that in this kind of broken system, success isn't measured by ethics. It's measured by the audacity and style of the crime. The bigger the theft, the more likely you are to get away with it. And almost perversely, the higher your status becomes.
So let's recap this cycle the allegory warns us about. It starts with those shaky foundations, borrowed sand, moves through deceptive leadership, a compliant media leading to collapse and escape. Then the political response isn't real change. It's about chasing the one guy who fled, writing some new laws, but only, as the poem says, to guard them well when next we sleep. It fully anticipates the failure happening again.
Yeah, and synthesizing that final insight, especially from the epilogue, the really bitter conclusion is that this wasn't just some technical economic misstep. It was fundamentally a moral failure, an intellectual failure, driven by terrible choices at the very top. That final line drives it home. Wealth was wasted, truth was sold, and fools made kings to guard the gold. The wrong people got power, which basically guaranteed the disaster would repeat.
That's such a potent distillation of how institutions can fail again and again. So, we'll leave you, the listener, with this thought to mull over. If we can recognize these patterns today, the babysitter regulators, the borrowed sand foundations in our own news headlines, and if this poem shows this cycle is centuries old, does seeing it laid out as an allegory actually help us break the cycle, or are we maybe just destined to repeat the collapse when next we sleep?
Something to definitely think about. Until our next deep dive.